Happy Friday. It's actually Tuesday because you're listening on Tuesday, probably. Maybe. I don't know.
We record on Fridays, though.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah, if you ever are just hanging out on a Friday and get a hankering to pray, you could pray for us because we might be recording.
Chances are.
All day.
All day.
For 24 straight hours.
All day, every day.
And then we condense it into a 45-minute episode.
I weep over the computer every single Monday when I have to edit it. It's agony. I get nothing done.
Genesis 29, where the weddings with an S take place.
Oh, dear.
Because you can't have just one.
And they're pretty close together.
All right, so we're starting Genesis 29 with Jacob continuing to go east. Starting in verse 1, then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. Already there's some connection to things that we've discussed in the past. Lot was heading east. It seems like there's a kind of overarching theme in the Bible of people who either are rebelling against God or struggling with God heading to the east. And as we will eventually see, Jacob doesn't stay in the east. He does eventually head back west, and as he heads back west, that's where he has his encounter with God. But it is interesting to note that as he's heading east, this is where he starts to encounter a lot of issues.
Yeah, so there's definitely this theme of people heading east and it either being like a developmental phase or like in Cain's instance of heading east, it was to the wilderness, the craziness. So you see that vein running throughout the scripture.
And then you see another well.
Oh.
Another water cooler story.
Yeah. He found his wife there, so that's pretty neat, except that he had to wait a really long time to get her.
Yeah, 7 years.
Let's not jump too far ahead.
So he sees the in the field, and there's 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. And then there was a stone on the well's mouth, a large stone. And when the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. This is rich. Like, there's a lot here in just 4 short verses. So you've got 3 flocks and then a large stone that needs rolled away to water the sheep. And Jacob kind of starts asking these questions, and then he bosses the shepherds around. So it's like a really weird dynamic, and there's just a lot of like fine details here that I feel like we have to break down one at a time.
Yeah, so Jacob is very assertive of himself here and was basically telling the herdsmen that, why are you gathering them together? It's not time to bring the herds in. And they're waiting by this well, but they have to wait until all of the flock is together, and Rachel's not there yet. So there's another one coming. And it is just weird that Jacob takes the lead here with these shepherds.
It's out of character for him.
Yeah, he's been passive relatively. Like the depiction you commonly get for Jacob is he's a tent-dwelling nerd and is not a man of assertion.
I do think that this is building off of the previous chapter. Just as Jacob is now taking the faith of his father as his own, whereas in the past, the faith in God was Isaac's. Whether or not he believed in God, and most likely he did, it was Isaac is the one who would hear from God. Isaac is the one giving the blessing. Now Jacob has heard from God, and now God will be his God. Now he's coming into his own. There are no authority figures above him at this point. He's gone off to seek his own fortune, to seek his own life and his own wife. And now he's come to these men. And we were told previously that Jacob was a man of learning. He understood things. He did spend a lot of time in the tents with the flocks and the herds. So because he's a man of learning and a man of understanding, he gets how things should be, and he understands that things right now aren't the way they should be. It doesn't make sense that all these shepherds would be out here gathered together because it's not time for it. And so because something doesn't make sense, he calls it out.
Yeah, no, and I think this is later on in the story. Laban wants him for work, and I think it's because he knows exactly what is right and what is good for flocks. Jacob, through the next few chapters, indicates that he is very good with livestock and raising livestock. But the scene here, you have these 3 shepherds and three herds with the shepherds that aren't watering yet. And then you see Rachel coming, and Jacob decides that he's going to move this big heavy rock by himself, and Rachel's herd drinks first.
There's a lot there. Like the action of Jacob moving the stone himself is valuable, because in verse 3, it implies that the shepherds have to do it together. But then Jacob is actually doing it himself here. And it doesn't sound like there's help, but there could be. So it's like he's serving her. And we don't really know why yet, because he doesn't know who she is. So it seems like an act of devotion or some sort of service to her. And it reminds me of when Rebecca was found, because she went and watered the camels. And so maybe he's calling back to his father's love story and serving her the way that his mother served. I don't know, but I see some connections there that are cool.
Yeah, it's almost an inversion of that story. Whereas before, there's the servant coming to find a wife for his master, and then the woman comes out, the young lady, and she waters the camels. In this instant, it's the husband, the future husband, coming to seek a wife. And in service to his wife, he moves a stone to water her livestock. So it's an inversion, almost a way of one family paying back the past kindness, because it's Isaac's offspring giving kindness to Laban's family, rather than Laban's family paying kindness to him.
Yeah, and in this specific instance, for me, there's a lot of Christological parallels here, because you have Jacob acting as this Christ figure, this bridegroom, waiting for his bride, who is shepherding her flock. She's called a shepherdess in Genesis 29 here, bringing her flock, symbolizing, I think, the church here. And Jacob, the Christ figure, rolls away the stone and waters the herd. And you have the parallels of the living water. Christ at the well says he's going to give the woman a drink of living water. And there's that connection, but also the three other herds here. I could see maybe a parallel to Israel, you know, how Jews first, then the Gentiles. The line from Israel drinks first, but then the other herds also come together and drink. And you have the four herds here symbolizing every direction, every nation going out. So you have the Jews first, then the Gentiles, and all of them are coming together to drink the water from the stone that's been rolled away, symbolizing resurrection, renewal, a waiting period. So it's mentioned that it's high day. It's not time to water yet. There's a connection there with when Jesus was crucified. They wanted to get his body down because it was coming close to high Sabbath. He was put in the tomb, the stone there, that was rolled away. When it was rolled away, the living water came out and everybody had way to salvation and access to God.
I like that. And I really liked what you said earlier too. When we were just talking, you said 4 flocks coming from every direction to represent every nation coming together under Christ.
Yeah, and that is my own interpretation. I can't solidify that in Scripture, but the numbers usually mean something in Scripture, and that's one of the connections that I could see there.
You mentioned the directions of north and south, east and west, too.
Yeah.
So
I think this is also a call forward, as often happens, because also in the Exodus story, after they've left Egypt, the tribes of Israel are split into 4. And it's interesting, that happens a lot. That also in Revelation with the 4 beasts around the base of God's throne. There definitely is significance, I think, to this, to the idea that it's not just all of the nations coming together. I do think that plays a role, but I think this is also meant to symbolize Israel itself, that it's basically the 4 groups of the tribes all coming together, that it's only once all of them together, but also there's one group from that group, and it's led by the
chosen.
Yeah.
Like she's the chosen
shepherdess,
the loved one. And we'll get into later, Leah actually carries the messianic line, but Rachel's the one who is loved.
Yeah, I think it is symbolic, both of Israel and of all the nations, of what God is going to do through them and for them.
One thing that I want to bring up here at this point is like in Genesis 28, so the last episode, we talked about how Jacob has this incredible vision, and it's so amazing and heavenly and spiritual that he anoints a rock and creates like a temple altar thing to God right there and dedicates to God. And I want to point out those miraculous moments are cool, but I think we tend to hyperfixate on those because they're so spiritual and they go into angels and portals and interesting ways to access God. But in Genesis 29, it's a little bit more subtle, but it's a holy moment nonetheless. And this moment points to Christ, whereas the last moment didn't necessarily point to Christ the same. And I think God puts those little Easter eggs for us to appreciate. Maybe Jacob could not appreciate them the way that we can, but it's like a warning to us through scriptures to be careful where you put your attention.
I think there's also another detail that's easy to miss, but that's just a little additional nugget, something that makes it a little bit more sweet and a little bit more emotional. After Jacob kind of points out that all of these guys are just sitting around not doing anything and their herds are all together, they talk about how usually it has to be that all of the shepherds have to come together in order to move this stone. It's a fairly large stone, and even small stones would be fairly heavy. And Jacob, upon seeing Rachel, is so moved and so excited, he doesn't wait for all of the shepherds to come together. He moves the stone for the well by himself.
He serves her. I think he sees her and he's pleased with her appearance and the fact that she's a hardworking woman. And he probably is so moved. But it's an important message to me because it's like this idea of the husband serving the wife before he kisses her. There has to be this development in a servant posture in marriage or in a romantic relationship before the romance or the acknowledgement can really begin. And I really like that it's outlined here like that, because in Song of Solomon, you don't see that as much. You see a lot of the passion, but you don't see as much of the service. She goes in search for him more than he goes in search for her, and it seems a little imbalanced. But here you see the priorities are straight. It's just Laban throws them off.
Old tricky Laban.
I have a feeling, and as we get into it, Cody has some cool historical facts, but I have a feeling that Laban really wasn't trying to be treacherous. I think he was probably just really attached to his kids. And I think he didn't want anybody else to marry his daughters. And I think also, depending on how you interpret Leah's condition, it might have been really hard for him to find somebody for her, but he was probably pleased that his daughters were able to end up with the same person.
We'll get to it in a second, but I agree with what you're saying. I think that in many ways, Laban is a reflection of Jacob. That Jacob did some underhanded things to his father and to his brother, but it was for the sake of the promise. It was because there was a prophecy spoken over his life that he had made a binding covenantal meal with Esau. This is something that was supposed to be given to him, and yet it wasn't being given to him, and so he did something underhanded to get what he believed was right, and rightfully his, and he was correct in that. Laban is doing something very similar. I do believe that he loves his daughters very much, and I do believe that, like he later says, it would be better for you to marry my daughter. I do think that he sees Jacob as a uniquely talented, capable man and a great man, and also someone who is a part of his family already. And so, obviously, he makes the most sense to marry his daughters, but also I think he recognizes poor Leah. Like, the girl doesn't seem to be gifted with great beauty like her sister is. And so I think Laban is looking after his daughter. We don't know how much older Leah is, but she is the eldest daughter and is still not yet married.
And if you told Lady Catherine de Bourgh, she would be scandalized at the younger marrying before the older.
All the Pride and Prejudice fans just went, yes!
Foolish child.
Foolish girl.
So Jacob meets Rachel. He waters the sheep. And then he kisses Rachel and weeps aloud in verse 11. And he tells Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And then Laban comes out and they embrace. He kisses him, brings him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, "Surely you're my bone and flesh." And he stayed with him a month. First of all, what are these things? Is it just, hey, I'm your relative and I'm Rebekah's son and all of that? Or is it something else?
It could be. We're not told explicitly everything that he tells them. By all these things, it's possible he talks about where he's come from, the story of Esau, his trip, him seeing the ladder to heaven, and also the watering of the sheep and everything. Or it could just be that he tells him everything that's happened so far, basically telling him everything that's happened in this chapter. That's tough because the original Bible was not written in chapters and verses. So there's no clear delineation of what things he would tell him.
I hear it in my head the way that like our 14-year-old would say it. Like, yeah, and Jacob told him all these things. And then he said, you're my bone and flesh. That's how I hear it. And it feels silly.
Yeah, he told him those things.
All these things. It's like, Madeline, what things?
I think we can be sure that he explains who he is, that he explains that Laban's sister is his mom, where he's come from, Isaac. He probably did literally explain everything that's happened to him in the story thus far, explaining why he's come here, why he needed to come here. He may have even explained the bit about the stairway to heaven. That all makes sense to me.
Yeah. So he stays there a month, and then presumably in verse 15, Laban says to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? This feels like a trick question. Like after a month, he had to have known, okay, he's got a thing for Rachel. Because any good dad notices when there's a dude courting her daughter or his daughter.
I think the wheels in his head have been turning.
No, and like Jewish tradition implies that Leah and Rachel were betrothed to Esau and Jacob, so they make it sound like they were already expecting a visit from both of them. I don't know if that's true or not. But.
Well, the Jewish tradition, though, says that Leah was dreading marrying Esau because she knew he was a godless man. They make her more righteous than our scriptures give us, but...
And that's why she had a weak face.
Because she was crying.
Eh.
Yeah, I agree. I think she was ugly, but...
Yeah. I think there is we've said it before, there's a tendency in Jewish tradition to try to prop up figures and make them a lot nicer than the story shows them. And sometimes it's plausible, but in this instance, no. I think the story actually makes it pretty clear what was happening here. It does seem like Laban wasn't expecting anybody. It seems like the two girls weren't betrothed prior to this point. Yeah, that...
And he didn't give her a nose ring.
No.
Rebecca got a nose ring.
Lucky girl.
But remember, Jacob is coming with nothing.
He could have at least given her a pebble.
But I think that 1 month period is actually very telling. I think that during that time, Laban actually got to know Jacob, and he got to see what he valued, how skilled he was as a herdsman.
He was a clever boy.
And he got to see what exactly it was that he wanted.
And that later on, like even after the bride price has been paid, the 7 years for Leah, the 7 years for Rachel, Laban still wants him around because he's really good at what he does.
Leah's eyes are weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Let's talk about verse 17 briefly, because I think this is the biggest indicator of Leah's true condition, which is honestly just being not pleasing to look at, or ugly, as Cody so indelicately put it.
Yeah, there's a lot of like interpretation here of what weak really means, but
it could mean tender.
It seems like a very clear compare contrast. Like Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance.
The but there is very important. It implies a contrast between them. So if one daughter is very clearly shown to be beautiful, the but means that the other woman, the other daughter, was not.
Yes. So it seems to be talking about outwardly beauty here. That would be what I would think.
I always thought of it as like a disability, like maybe she just couldn't see very well. But to me now that I'm older and stuff, like, she ugly.
Yeah, I think I've heard it interpreted that she could have been cross-eyed. That actually does make some sense to me. Because some of the other interpretations of, no, she was squinting all the time because she couldn't see super well. Okay, weird take. But yeah, no matter what, the point is that Leah is not as pretty as Rachel. And also she's the older sister, and realistically she probably should have been married by now. And Laban's aware of this.
And this is, I guess I could grab my idiom book, but it seems more like an idiom. Like we say, people are easy on the eyes. That's usually a way of saying not so aggressively somebody's good looking. And to me, it seems more like an idiom than anything else.
Boy, fellas, that girl's soft in the eyes. Yeah, that does sound like an idiom.
So we're all in agreement.
Oh, yeah.
Leah is just...
She ugly.
U-G-L-Y. She ain't got no.
Poor girl. So Laban has 2 daughters. Jacob only wants one of them, makes a deal for 7 years.
Why 7 years?
There could be a few reasons for that. No matter what, it's meant to be a long period of time. And this is basically supposed to be the dowry being paid to the family. So Jacob is saying, look, I will work for 7 years for free and I will make you very wealthy during that time. This is the only thing I can offer because I have nothing from my old home. But this is to let you know that I'm serious and that I can provide for your daughter and that she is worth it. This is how much she is worth to me.
Yeah, but like 7 years, let's just assume, okay, and I know that's not a good thing, but let's just assume that Leah is 28 and Rachel is 25 or something like that. 7 years is a long time for childbearing years. So it's a weird number. It's like a long number.
And I think that there are additional points to be made in that. At the initial point, it's obvious that Jacob is very attracted to Rachel because she's young and she's beautiful. 7 years later, I don't care how young she was initially, 7 years later, a lot of that youthful beauty will have faded. But the Bible makes a point of saying that he loved her, that the 7 years went by like nothing, like only a few days, because of how much he loved her. The point of the story is that, yes, his initial attraction is largely because of how she looks. However, he grew to properly love her over time. And then, as we're going to see, it takes another 7 years. So 14 years from the initial meeting, he still loves her desperately by the end of that. So while the specific number may have relevance, the idea that it's just a long period of time is also relevant.
But 7 is a biblically important number.
That it is.
For completeness. So he completed the contract. Maybe that's all it's significant for.
It could be like the 7 days of creation or something too. Honestly, I think it's just coincidence because there are ancient Near East law codes like the Code of Hammurabi, which are consistent with a 7-year period of indentured servitude for this type of transaction. And it is truly cultural and not related to God. It could be any of the civilizations and any religions.
Whoa.
Yeah.
They lived in the ancient Near East? They followed those cultural norms to an extent? No.
I would still say that Hammurabi didn't get the figure of 7 from nowhere. It's not as if they were sitting around and they're like, okay, so number of years for a contract, how are we feeling? 6? Nah, 6 is a weird number. Why is it weird? I don't know. 8? No, that's too many. Okay, split the difference at 7? Yeah, 7's fine. Like, I don't think that's the way that it worked. I think that stretching all the way back to creation, 7 has relevance. And so that relevant number, that figure of completeness, was passed down because there's Noah and then he has kids. And so you have the regions that develop the Semitic languages. So there should be some shared culture amongst all of them. And so there's some relevance the number 7 has across all these cultures. I would still say it's not fully coincidental. One, there's the week, like the bridal week. So
I thought you were saying WEAK, and I was like, oh, where are you going with this?
No. Yeah, there's the period of 7 days during which there is the bridal feast. There's the wedding feast. So it makes sense that if there's going to be a full week of feasting, that you do a full 7 years, a group of 7. And the heptad, the group of 7, is very relevant in pretty much all of Jewish literature. Like in Daniel, it talks about the 77s. Like groups of 7 are just very important in the Bible. I don't think that it has to be like an earth-shattering meaning, but it does indicate that there is a meaning behind this gesture for Jacob, that it's meant to be a figure of completeness. It's connected to the group of 7 as in the 7 days that there are for a wedding feast. And also the 7 in the Code of Hammurabi that would be relevant for indentured servitude. So it's meant to touch all these different realms that in every sense, 7 is an appropriate number. It's also a long enough period of time where his bride would no longer be as youthfully beautiful, but he still loves her. So it is a meaningful number, I would say.
So in verse 21, Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. He's very direct and bossy here. It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He was ready.
He was ready.
He didn't get what he bargained for, though.
Nope.
So Laban made a feast, but in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter, Leah to be her servant, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it is not done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn, like a proper English woman.
It simply isn't done, my dear. Can you think of the scandal?
So there's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, let's talk about... So Jacob loves the youngest daughter, but in Laban's tricks learns that it is a cultural custom for the oldest to marry first. Is this true?
Yeah, the Newsy tablets are very explicit on this. So around 1500 BC is when these came out.
The Newsy tablets?
Yeah, Newsy.
Like the Newsies?
Soak 'em for crutchy.
Yeah, so in those, it's very explicit on like marriage covenants. There's some sister and wife adoptions, different kind of contracts for marrying somebody, but also adopting them as a sister, for like clan alliances. And if they're adopted as a sister and married as a wife, they have a higher status than either other wives in that area. And the clan that you were marrying to would have also a higher status within that like marriage contract and family relationship. And goes into detail about genealogies, a lot like Genesis does. So those parallel quite a bit in their marriage covenants, rights, and genealogies.
Do we think that Jacob was truly ignorant to this cultural norm because he was wise? Or do we think that he was just like, that's an old-fashioned rule and we're in the new century, man, and we don't have to go in order anymore? Do you think there's anything to expound on there? Because for such a clever dude, like, he seems to really miss the boat on this one.
I think that's not what he made a covenant for, though. So he didn't make a covenant for Leah, and they had 7 years to marry off Leah before the marriage of Rachel and Jacob.
But is this a covenant? I don't really consider it a covenant. It's not called that, and they don't do the covenant stuff.
And they feast together. But they're making a contract at the very least.
There's no thigh grab, Cody.
It's an agreement.
Yeah.
Whether you want to say that it's as deep as a covenant, at the very least, Laban knows why his nephew is working so hard for him. He knows why he's here.
Yeah.
It was definitely for Rachel, not for Leah.
Yeah.
So I think it might have been a practice of the area, and we see that in the cultural context surrounding it, but that's not what he made an agreement to. So it's still shifty.
Do we know if Rebecca was the oldest daughter when she was married? Because Laban gave her away.
I don't know.
We know that she had a brother named Laban, but I think that's mostly what we know. I don't remember, there was like a list of all of the people that had been born to that family.
There are no traditional documents that name other sisters. Just say that Laban's probably older.
I think it's pretty certain that he is older.
Yeah.
But regardless...
I was just seeing if he was up to funny business.
Yeah, I got you. But going back to your original question, I think it's pretty certain that Jacob did know. And I think that this actually parallels his story with Esau. That there are expectations for the older brother. The older brother is supposed to get the blessing of the firstborn and is also supposed to receive the birthright. And Jacob got both of those, in spite of the fact that he wasn't the eldest. And now we see him approaching the other side of his family, and he chooses the younger of the two sisters. This isn't what's supposed to be done. Usually the oldest of the sisters is supposed to get married first. And it is an insult to Leah.
Was he so blinded by her beauty, by Rachel's beauty, that he just didn't care about the cultural traditions and requirements? Were his eyes weak because of the beauty that he saw in Rachel?
That may be part of it, but I don't think that he loved her purely because of her beauty. I think that over time he grew to love her for her. That's the point of the 7 years, or actually the 14 years that he waits to finally marry her.
Maybe, but he yells at her in the next chapter.
Sure. That doesn't mean that it's always, it's, you'll notice that with all of the patriarchs, they all love their wives, and yet there's always trouble in paradise. There are always issues.
Yeah. Cody, do you have anything to add?
He only really waited 7 years and a week, though, for Rachel.
I guess technically, yes.
Yeah, he still had to do the servant, but he was on credit for the second sister there.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that he doesn't wait until the end of the 7 years. He just basically waits to the end of that first week so that all of the focus can be on Leah and she gets to actually be a proper wife.
That's expensive, man. 2 anniversaries a week apart.
Jacob was a tricky guy. He probably found a way to
alternate years.
Or he hated Leah, so
he still made lots of babies with her.
That's actually, no, that's a good point. Because as tricky as Jacob can be and as unfair as all of this seems to be to Leah, it seems that Jacob understands that there is a marital duty that he has to both of his wives. And there is a duty. It would have been very unfair to Leah to be married to Jacob, but then he never spends any time with her at all, and he never gives her any children. And she would have had no recourse if that was the case. There wasn't going to be any divorce or anything like that. She would have just been his wife, but effectively a widow forever. and she would have had no children, which would have been an even greater insult to her than if she had just remained unmarried. So Jacob is put in a very difficult position here. And there is actually the question, should he have even married Rachel and taken on a second wife?
Oof.
Should he have? I don't know. That's what he did his covenant for.
Yes, that's the trouble. He did end up getting married to Leah, so that was an actual marriage, and yet that wasn't, because that's not the woman that he wanted, and he was tricked into consummating the marriage with her. And people may listen to that and think, he should have known.
Oh, he should have not been drunk.
Yeah, he got very drunk because that's the thing that you do during marriage celebrations. And also there's an important detail for ancient Near East. The veil is on the bride up until the point where you seal the deal. It's not like today where you lift the veil to kiss the bride. There was a form of veil that was just on until, it's nighttime and you're drunk and it's time.
But it doesn't say he's drunk, like, outright.
No, but it's talking about the feasting.
So, yeah. Like, Jesus
They
turned
didn't have
water into
electricity,
wine for
Cody.
a reason.
Maybe it was just really dark in the tent.
Now, I think it was partly that, but I think it was a summation of a lot of things.
I would feel really uncomfortable with, like, my son-in-law coming to us and being like, give me my wife.
With 7 years.
He was very demanding for what he wanted. Maybe he was blinded by his lust.
Could be.
He's very demanding. Give me my wife that I may go into her.
He might be going into the tent, Cody. Perf.
Into her? That's not
No.
tent. That is very clearly biblically knowing your wife.
Doesn't say it. No, the Bible does talk about sex, so it's fine. They're married, so
That's what he's doing.
he doesn't know that he's married to her, but
My biggest question in this whole swap is Rachel has to be complicit to it, I think. Like, she has to know what's going on.
she's not as honorable as we believe.
Here's the thing, because it would be both Rachel and Leah, and you'd have to argue that they both knew and that they let this happen. There are a lot of things that don't make sense to us from a modern context, but at this time, Laban is the patriarch of his family. What he says goes. And we're assuming that this is Laban's plan from the very beginning. It could be that after 7 years, he's gotten so used to Jacob's skill and Jacob's ability to make him wealthy that kind of last minute, or even some point in the last year or the year before, he goes, you know what? This is too good to let stop. I need to keep going. I need to keep this guy here. And so it could have been that this is something that he thrusts on his daughters last minute.
It could also be that Laban spent a lot of time looking for a husband for Leah, and being unsuccessful, Rachel realized, hey, I'm not going to be able to marry until she does, and I want to get on with my life, so I guess whatever.
But this is a time where patriarchal authority is not absolute, but it's pretty darn close to it. What your dad says, you have to do. And that's the cultural understanding. Now, it's not as if the laws of the universe literally force these women to go along with it, but effectively the societal pressures around them their entire lives have conditioned them to where if their dad says something, they do it. And it doesn't matter if they like it or agree with it, it's what they do. And in the end, Rachel still marries the man that she loves, and Leah gets to marry someone.
Hey, it doesn't say in here that Rachel loves him. He loves her.
That is true. It's not specifically said, but it is implied.
He's head over heels.
Yes. He saw her and he knew. But if you think about it, they had a lot in common. Like, she's a shepherdess. Jacob is clearly gifted with that.
What more do you need? You take care of sheep. I take care of sheep.
We're getting married.
We're getting married. And your sister's soft in the eyes. Baby, come back. What did I say?
Yeah.
So he gets to the point where he realizes that it's Leah in his bed. And then he complains, and Laban tells him that's just not how it's done. And then he says, complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So he's giving Rachel to Jacob on credit. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. So maybe he did love Leah a little bit, and served Laban for another 7 years. And then they had a bunch of babies.
Yeah. So the play on, like Ben mentioned, Laban acting as Rebecca here, is Laban also in the right for doing the switch? Because it seems like Leah is blessed, one, with children up front, but also the messianic line is through Leah, not through Rachel. What do you think of that?
God plays favorites.
Oh, shots fired.
I would agree.
I think God sees the underdog a lot, and he's like, all right, you definitely are afflicted, and so I'm going to find ways to bring you comfort in this world so that you can bear what you've been given. It's not necessarily because Rachel has her own benefits. There's also very good perks to her life. It's just Leah is not as gifted in the ways that Rachel is. And so God comforts her. I don't necessarily see favoritism here. I was joking, but I definitely see God picking and choosing how and when and where he blesses people, especially according to affliction or feeling unloved or unseen. Like Hagar is a good example of that. Ishmael's name is proof of that. So
I like that.
God loves us, especially when we're hurting. But it is weird to me because he's got these two wives now. Leah gets children, but we find out that Rachel becomes barren.
And it says when the Lord saw Leah was hated,
he opened her womb, but
opened
Rachel
her
was
womb.
barren in verse 31. And to me, like this is, as a woman who's experienced infertility and somebody who knows people who are dealing with infertility for years and years, it's really sad to think that God could just flip on and off a switch in a woman's womb and make her barren depending on how much she is hated or loved, like how blessed she is. It's confusing, definitely. Like thinking back to Genesis 3:16 and how God cursed Eve with this, you will experience much grief in your childbearing years. That is, I think, what we're seeing here.
It's hard because I can see both sides of the what would be perceived as meanness, but also mercy. Like Leah's the hated one here, and probably be a lot harder to bear if she was also barren or wasn't granted so many children up front. And you see her mentality behind that. She seems to be, in the rest of this chapter, pursuing Jacob and wanting the affection of Jacob that Rachel has, but she's not getting that, but she's still having children.
But I think for Leah, it's sad because instead of acknowledging that her children were blessings from God, she focused on her husband, which, okay, fine. That's Old Testament time. But also, like, it would have been such a beautiful opportunity for her to develop more of a dependence on God.
You do see an acknowledgement of God. That's the way that she names her children. There's an acknowledgement. I agree with you in that her focus is not completely on God. It is in part on her husband, and probably more than it should be. And yet there is still, she acknowledges that these children are from God.
She does acknowledge that, but she names the children, like Reuben means see a son. So she's longing for Jacob's love as a response to her motherhood. And then Herd is Simeon, and that's because the Lord has heard that I am hated. God has given me this son. She feels rejected and unloved. Then Levi is attached, which is now this time my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. And then Judah is praised. This time I will praise the Lord. It takes her 4 tries to get to the point where she's praising the Lord. Like every other time she's like, husband, love me. And I think we're very similar to that in our fickleness as people because we're looking for the approval of people instead of God's love and appreciating who he is to us. But it's sad because she could have leaned into this earlier.
It's also interesting that the 4th son is Judah, and at that point she has accepted more or less where she's at, and she chooses to praise God. And it's the son she praises God with that is the one who will produce the Messiah. I do think that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's also got the tetragrammaton.
Go. A what?
Who to what?
No, pretty close. No, so it's got like Judah has got the 4 letters of the tetragrammaton, so the YHWH. And it's very rare in names. And rabbis and different Jewish tradition has this as a prophecy that Leah has gotten for the line, the messianic line will be through her.
And what's also really interesting is that Judah's name does have the Yud, Hey, Wav, and Hey, but it also has the Dalet, the D. And As we've discussed before, each of these individual letters were initially represented as pictograms that had a meaning. Dalet was a door. And so when you take all of that together, it is God, like the individual letters that make up God's name, but also the door, meaning that Judah is the doorway through which God is going to enter the world, enter into Israel. So that's also an interesting detail. It's also interesting that Dalet is the fourth letter in the Jewish alphabet and is also meant to represent the number 4. And he's the fourth son. So also another interesting detail. I don't know how deep that's supposed to be, but it's interesting.
Very interesting.
So ultimately, she has accepted where she's at in life. She's praising the Lord for her fourth son. And then her womb is closed. She stops having children.
For now.
But she makes some decisions in the next chapter that I don't enjoy. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about this for a second. I put it up higher in the outline. Let me highlight it so you can see it. Okay, so under C, let's talk about verses 24 and 29. So these are the verses where Laban is giving his daughter's servants. So Zilpah and Bilhah, I believe. Yeah. And the thing that I find interesting is that we're learning about these servants in this chapter. And in the next chapter, both girls give these servants to Jacob to make babies. And I know we're going to talk about it in the next chapter, but this is just a generational thing, like what we've been talking about in other episodes, like generational curses or even just generational patterns. It's here for a reason. And we're introduced to these servants here because later they're significant as additional women that he has children with. It's a bummer for me because they haven't learned.
No. And while it ends slightly better in that all of these sons become the 12 tribes of Israel, it still leads to similar issues that we've seen before: favoritism amongst the children and fighting amongst the children. You don't see the fighting amongst the children from the same mother, but you do see favoritism. And what's very interesting to me is that Rachel offers up her own servant to produce children for her, and yet Jacob does not see those children as Rachel's. It never works the way
but
that...
she does.
She does.
Yeah.
Jacob does not. No, he only sees Benjamin and Joseph as her children, and he refers to them as that. And when he thinks that Joseph is gone, Benjamin is the one kid he basically loves. So Rachel's attempts to have children through surrogacy don't work because that's not how Jacob sees them.
So how is it being the favorite? Your name is Benjamin.
I'm most certainly not the favorite.
I'm kidding.
Not by any stretch.
Your parents are saints and they don't play favorites.
I think Moses saw the issue with this, or at least the leaders, the elders of Israel, because Deuteronomy 21:15 is like directly against this type of mentality. Is if a man has two wives and loves one wife more than the other, but has a firstborn with the unloved wife, he has to treat that child as the firstborn and give the double portion to that child. There is a Mosaic law specifically on this issue.
And there also becomes a law about taking multiple wives, and the law is don't.
Yep.
It's a dumb idea.
We tried it. Trust me. Beta tested. Didn't work.
Still got some bugs to work out. But.
And then it gets to the New Testament, and then Paul's just don't bother marrying.
And it stupefies me the fact that there's a small group of people trying to push for the idea that polygamy is blessed in the Bible, that it's a good thing. And I've yet to see a single instance in the Bible where it actually works out in a positive way.
I don't know, Cody. Do you feel like you could handle more than me?
Absolutely not.
It's terrible.
Terrible.
I certainly would not want more than this. It's like Cody is enough. I can't imagine. Could you imagine having to remember all of the special days? You know, when you're dating somebody and it's our 1 month anniversary. Oh, it's our anniversary of our first date. Oh, it's the anniversary of when you proposed. Oh, it's the anniversary of our pregnancy test. Like all of this stuff. And you have to do that with like multiple women. Are
Men
you
already
kidding
can't
me?
do that with one woman.
No.
They didn't have Hallmark back then, so I don't think that was important.
Just saying. Unless you don't have a job and all you do is focus on your romantic relationships, and that's not how we're called to live. Like, I just don't see it being possible. And also like jealousy and emotions. So
You see the jealousy in Bible.
yeah,
Like,
I'm really excited for next week because Rachel says some stuff and I'm like, oh, you're a bad girl.
Jacob yells at her.
Yeah. He yells at her first, and then she's like, all right, fine. We'll do it this way. And then she's, ha! And that's not right.
And thus the problems were solved forever.
Yeah. All right. That closes us out for today. Please don't forget to enter our giveaway. Bye.